Okay. Any refinements or any way that you can make that a little bit more concise, or does it include everything you want it to include?
Let's see if there's some kind of practice. I think that's okay for now. We can always get wordsmith a little bit later on in the process, right?
I think it covers it all.
On to another issue, enforcement.
I don't know if there's anything else on enforcement that we would want to do. Does anyone else? There was nothing else really identified in the weaknesses.
In the weaknesses, I did see in the summary, unit is too punitive and would like to see a more educational, supportive approach to discipline. And then the first two bullet points or summaries did address the investigative timeline, which you're addressing with this first objective. Another weakness I saw, communication needs to improve publication of disciplinary actions to inform stakeholders of the work the enforcement unit does. So just throwing some out there.
Oh, yeah.
Are we still identifying other actions? Other issues?
Yes.
So one of the issues that was, we're too punitive. They thought we were too punitive. And they would like to see more educational, supportive approach to discipline.
Would we want to word this something as also investigate opportunities to be more educational and supportive and approach to discipline while, ensuring public safety, which I know is too generic, but or while assuring that processes are effective in order to something like that.
Investigate less punitive approach to discipline while ensuring processes are effective to provide a more educational, supportive approach to discipline.
This is Reza. I'm a little bit hesitant about the current wording, and I'll make a comment about the critique itself. The current issue kind of implies that as of now, we are being punitive, and we're not. We've, in every closed session, I think the focus is pretty appropriate that we are not punitive. We are protecting the public, and I feel pretty good about what we do there. And so I wonder, folks have made this comment, but I wonder what do board members actually think that we are overly punitive, or are we just doing this in response to the fact that some people out there have brought it up? The flip side of this, of course, you've got to consider this is probably the perspective of licensees who've been disciplined, and of course others. I'm sure others, may think this as well. Their attorneys, for one, and others. But the flip side of this, of course, is those folks who are being protected by the actions that we take. So, anyways, the first point I made, just to reiterate, I don't think it's a good idea to use the phrase "investigate less punitive approach." I think Mary had a good suggestion there. I forget what it was, but it removed the implication that we are currently being punitive in our disciplinary decisions, which I really don't think we are. So that's one strong recommendation I'd make, is to revise, do that basically, and then just evaluate for yourselves if this is really an issue.
Yeah, I was sort of, I totally get that, because I didn't feel like we are, but what if we say something like ensure appropriate discipline, or ensure our approach to discipline is evidence-based and effective, or something like that? Would that be more, like, we will take a look at it to make sure we're not being punitive? I was going to suggest that the ensure be the action.
I sometimes, the punitive part, I think has to do with, we require all these things, especially if it's substance or DUI or something, is that they have to do X, Y, and Z, and then the testing, they have to test so often, and most of the time, I think they find that punitive because it costs so much. They can't afford it, or I don't know. I think they're referring to punitive as, we ask so much of them. Yeah, they need to be disciplined, but some of what we're asking them to do, like tests and call in, I understand the call in. I think we need to reevaluate all that.
Yeah, maybe, I think if we really did that, to make sure that we looked at the evidence, to make sure what are the most appropriate and effective processes to address disciplinary issues. Reza, are you just suggesting we don't talk about it at all, or?
Not necessarily. I'm not suggesting that you not talk about it. I'm reluctant to make a whole lot of suggestions, but I'm not suggesting not to include it, but I encourage you to think critically about this. Even though, according to the I forget what we call this, but the report, the environmental scan, I'm sorry. It says stakeholders say the enforcement unit is too punitive and would like to see a more educational, supportive approach to discipline. Okay, that means you've gotten comments from a lot of people who think that we are too punitive. Are there people out there who don't think that? Probably. And, are there more people who think we're doing a good job than think we're being punitive? I don't know. But I just, I encourage you to evaluate each of these weaknesses critically. Don't dismiss any one of them. Obviously, if people are raising it as an issue, it's something we ought to think about. But, it was just kind of encouraging you to think about it critically, question if it is an issue that we necessarily need to address. I mean, there's always going to be people out there who are displeased in one way or another. We should try to minimize, the number of people that are displeased with us to the extent we can while doing our job. But I think it's kind of inevitable that some people, no matter how good we're doing our job, are going to have complaints. So I think to kind of wrap it up, I'm not saying don't include this. I would say don't include kind of that language that I initially called out and that has been removed as of now. But otherwise, I think it's fine if you do think it is an issue to address either, supportive and educational approach to discipline or just kind of what it is now. So yeah.
Thank you. This is the
Sorry.
co-facilitator. Thank you. This is Elizabeth. I understand your concern. If you believe this is not an actual issue, that's okay. The whole point of this environmental scan is everybody has a different perspective. It doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it wrong. It's a perspective. And if the board has a different one, that's okay. But trying, the way that we see it is trying to gap that difference of opinion, trying to address it. So if they do feel there is a punitive approach, is there a lack of communication? Is there something as a board that you can do to reinforce that the discipline is there for a reason? It's something that you can communicate to them. We hear you, this is why we do it, or we hear you, and try to address it that way, but not necessarily trying to add it as an objective just because you're trying to cross it off the environmental scan, but because you really hear them and want to address their concern. So it doesn't have to be reviewing the discipline or ensuring it. If you feel that you already do, that's okay. Just perhaps addressing it in a way of communicating with the stakeholders, our discipline process or something like that.
I mean, I do think it would be reasonable to do some sort of a periodic review of our approach and how, and does it really, is it the most appropriate to get the results that we want with the least amount of, requirements that we put on someone that may not make a difference.
Thank you. So any refinements to this objective? Ensure appropriate approach to discipline is evidence-based and effective.
For public protection, do we need to put that? I mean, we're doing it to protect the public.
Or if you would like to see it as part of the benefit, you can definitely do so.
That's the whole reason why we do this.
Any other refinements or feedback?
I think that looks good.
Any additional objectives under enforcement? And one last call for the benefit of your first objective. I like that it's specific in the benefit. I do see that it's a little lengthy, which is okay since you have it spelled out. Did you want to make it a little bit more concise, that last part, the benefit?
You know what, I think we can do final wordsmithing later. Because we've got a lot still to get through.
Thank you. So we will move on to the next goal area if everyone agrees.
This is the other facilitator. If we want to take public comment after this.
Oh,
goal
yes.
area. Yeah, sorry. That's okay.
Thank you.
Sure. All right. So I'll open up the Q&A, and if any member of the public would like to comment on the goal area of enforcement, please type. I would like to make a comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions, and we'll give you a moment. This is Tricia. I'm not seeing any requests for public comment. Are we okay with closing the Q&A panel?
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we will move on to our next goal area. Continuing education. Do you have any refinements to the goal area statement?
There appears to be no comment. We can move on.
Okay, I just wanted to point out, just seeing the pattern in the previous, and the mission, vision, values, and the, one of the first goal areas, the word excellence. Is that something you want to leave in there? I believe the conversation was about minimum standards and high quality.
We say ensure, yeah, that's kind of lofty excellence. To Reza's point earlier today. To ensure, I don't know, competency or competence.
I was going to suggest continued competency, or the word continued implying that, although we already use continuing in the sentence. Maybe up to date, or
Do you prefer relevant or up-to-date competency?
I like relevant.
Yeah, I like relevant too. Although, you know what, maybe by saying that, because we don't do any assessment to say, but the continuing education credits that somebody take relevant to their practice, do we? Or is it's not making that assumption?
That's a
I
good
think you're
point.
probably right, Mary. They could take whatever continuing education they want, even if it has nothing to do with what they do, so long as they're approved.
So the continuing education in our regulation states that it has to be pertinent to the practice of nursing, and then it also states that it has to be post-licensure. There are some qualifications in there, and then now most recently that's being updated to our regulations to add the implicit bias to it. So just so that you guys are aware, there is some specific language in our regulation around continuing education.
Did you want to keep it to ensure competency or add an objective there?
You want to say ongoing competency?
The thesaurus as well, so ongoing.
And we may not need to say in practice, just say ongoing competency and promote public safety.
Everyone, feel free to just open your mic or send us, Tricia Sinclair or myself, Elizabeth Cornell, a message through chat. And we won't read your name, we'll just make the suggestion out loud.
I think that looks good.
Moving on. Do you need a couple minutes to have a discussion about continuing education, or would you like to go straight into it?
Thoughts?
No.
Okay, I think we can go on into it.
I don't know, I was just thinking about what Laura was saying according to our regulations. Go back to the,
Do you want to go back to,
yeah, I just, Laura said that, go back to the previous slide. She said continuing education standards, she mentioned according to the regulations. I don't know if it's standards to ensure or standards. according to whatever, I don't know, regulations? I mean, because we're doing it according to the regulations. Okay, you guys help me out. We don't have to put it on there, but I just thought, since she mentioned it, I mean, we're doing this according to the regulations to ensure ongoing.
Yeah.
No difference?
I'm a little bit, this is Reza, I'm not sure, to the regulations is necessary. And also, we might update our regulations around continuing education.
Okay, take it out then. I'm okay. All right, let's continue.
Any issues you would like to start addressing under continuing education?
I mean, one of the things that was brought up is the cumbersome process on when renewing license, which I would second that it is cumbersome, having recently done it. But I'm not sure if that's something we want to call out in a strategic plan. That seems to be more around, just the whole process with Breeze and everything and how that. So I'm not sure not advocating for necessarily putting anything in for that. The one area I think we definitely should address is our commitment to auditing.
We did have it up there for just a second, but I want to make sure that any of the other board members, if you believe that it should be on the strategic plan, the reporting process.
What does reporting, as in, like, let's say I'm renewing my license and I'm reporting all the classes I took in the 2-year span? Is that what that means?
I get this.
My understanding, please correct me if I'm wrong.
The weakness that was called out is that members cite continuing education reporting as a weakness, saying the current process of having licensees list them online is burdensome.
Don't they scan their certificates? I mean, they have to write them out, but they also have to scan them.
No, you don't.
I don't think you need to scan them.
No.
Probably makes more sense for them to just scan their certificates. I don't know. I'm not a nurse and I don't have to do that, so.
But how does that look on the board end, going through all of those certificates versus listing them?
I would hope that they would verify them. I mean, I could make up a bogus certificate.
Well, there's a BRN number associated with it.
So I can interject here really quick, Dolores. On Breeze right now, it's an option to upload the certificates for proof of the continuing education. On the Breeze page, it has you enter the provider, the CEP provider number, the name of the course, as well as the units or hours that are associated with that. There is an option to upload the certificate of completion for that right there. So in the audit process right now, it is not a requirement to upload those certificates. It is a requirement to enter that data. However, some people just enter 30 CUs completed and then they move forward because there's not it's not a smart system. So it doesn't have where it can read what was inputted and validate it before moving on. So that's why we have to do the auditing. With the process that allows for the certificates of completion to be uploaded and verified with the information that's put into Breeze, if we made that a mandatory thing, that would help us with the auditing process. As now with the auditing process, we notice the RN, we request them to submit the copies of the certificates of completion, which they are required by statute to maintain in their possession for 4 years.
Lori, do you know Are there any other states that have a more automated system where those people who are providing continuing education credits would be required to enter something into a database that said, here are the people who completed it and their hours, and then though that could be tracked to the individual nurse and the BRN, so that this would just be automated?
I haven't heard that yet, and the kind of the issue that we're running into with that is the continuing education providers do not have to reside in California, and they do not have to be necessarily approved in California. We do have the ability to accept CEUs from out-of-state providers as well. So if there's an out-of-state provider and there is a lot of other they're providing this to a bunch of different nurses, their system would have to do that. But that would be exciting to me to have something like that where they can just report in and communicate with our system. That would be beautiful. But I haven't heard of anything specifically yet.
How would you like to address? Or do you have any other issues you wanted to add, or would you like to start addressing these two issues that you have up here?
So if we use the verb for the CE reporting process, simplify, but that would mean that we look into changing the process,
Yeah. I just look
or
at
streamlining it.
tool that was offered some possible objectives. One of those is devise a more user-friendly method for licensees to report their continuing education units to encourage compliance and improve customer service. That sounds sort of like what we were talking about.
Did you want to add that as the objective? How Mary just read it out?
I don't know if we want to actually, thinking about it, we want to actually commit to devise.
That's what I was asking, yeah. I mean, that's
that-
implying,
We could research or investigate.
We're going to do a lot of investigation, aren't we?
Yeah.
Would improve be a word or no? Like improve and
Yeah.
Okay. And what would be the benefit of the CE reporting process?
Streamline.
Streamline.
As the benefit to streamline?
Do we want to say investigate opportunities to improve? So we're not committing to definitely doing it, but seeing what's available, because
I certainly like that.
Investigate to improve.
Do a lot of investigation.
Well, a lot of the improvements do start with a thorough review of the program or the issue at hand, and then making changes.
Appropriate ways to improve.
Appropriate changes, thank you. So investigate ways to improve a CE reporting process, and the benefit would be to streamline.
and improve customer service.
Okay. Thank you. Any refinements to this objective? I have had some clients in the past concerned with using a lot of investigate, review, research in their action items. And a way to solve that concern for themselves, they added investigate and update if needed or if necessary as part of the action. So just throwing that out there.
we could do analyze instead of investigate. I'm just trying to find
Yeah.
something different that hasn't,
I like an update if needed, right?
Yeah, but investigate an update as needed.
Investigate, you want to go back to investigate?
I don't. Rosa, what's the difference?
So we can
Rosa?
investigate and
Analyze what verbiage would be good here. I'm okay with either one, but
I think that they
Be
are
an option.
we could say
pretty,
assess.
pretty close. Personally, I think they're pretty close. Total subjective preference for me is analyze, but, and I like Dolores's suggestion as well. But I think they're close enough that whatever you all think sounds best.
I think analyze would probably be a better choice since we already have a system in place and now we just want to improve it.
we need to. Yeah. Either way, I think analyze is fine.
Any other refinements to this particular objective? Again, feel free to send a chat message or just unmute your microphone if you would like to make comments.
So commitment to auditing, what's the action? We need an action and a benefit to those, don't we?
Yeah, I would suggest increase audits of nurses and continuing education providers to ensure compliance. Compliance, yeah, with continuing education requirements.
Any refinements?
Hey, that looks good. It's direct.
Should we move on to another objective? If there are any other issues in the area of continuing education?
I mean, there are comments about wanting the board to offer more continuing education courses. I'm not sure I see that as our role. And also greater availability and affordability.
I think those are factors that are determined by the market.
Yeah.
I mean, do we offer continuing education courses through the board? Like, do we have, if you go on the VRN website, can you get on a continuing education course?
No, we do not.
Okay, I didn't think we did. So I don't think we want to get into that business. We'll let others do that, right?
I think that would decrease any conflict of interest that might arise. Yeah, if we let that be handled by not the board.
Yeah. I mean, unless it was training specific about board either activities or requirements or regulations, right? But
We can do that without putting it towards continuing education and give it to them for free.
I'm good with just these two.
Yeah, I agree.
And just throwing it out there, and I know it does not need to be addressed, but if the licensees are under the perception that the board does or should put together CE trainings, there could be a little disclaimer on the website saying, due to conflict of interest, the board does not offer any CE trainings or something like that. So are we ready to move on to the next goal area?
Yes.
Okay.
And we need to take public comment first, though.
Oh, thank you again.
You're welcome. All right. Okay, so I will go ahead and open up the Q&A. All right, so if any member of the public would like to comment on continuing education objectives, please use the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and type, I would like to make a comment, and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions for your reference, and we'll give you a moment to access the feature. All right, I'm not seeing any requests for public comment. Are we good with closing the Q&A?
Sure.
Okay. Right.
This is the co-facilitator, just a friendly reminder to those that have their microphones unmuted.
It's on the driveway, still smells like dog
You
piss.
can hear the background noise.
You want to just list it and get it out?
Nobody's gonna buy that.
You do it for free.
This is Ken Marlboro. There was a statement made about a disclaimer for the courses. I think actually there is a disclaimer on the website.
Whatever ends up being.
Oh, thank you.
Protect
Yeah.
the driveway, but
For
then they dispose of it.
Hold on, can Lori's unmuted. Lori?
Sorry about that. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you again, Kenneth, for that one. So I'll pass it over to the facilitator, Tricia.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. And let me go ahead and give you control so you can do the typing on this one. All right, so our next goal area is educational oversight. And please read the definition and let me know if you would like to make any changes to it.
Advances or promote?
I might say establishes or something like that, implements or.
I'm not sure we need to say higher either, just establishes educational standards to ensure quality of education and customer protection.
For almighty, higher.
Right. Right.
Don't we just regulate educational?
We establish educational standards, right?
Yeah,
Okay, so the board establishes educational or education standards or educational standards.
What about nursing education standards?
Okay, nursing education standards.
yeah, it's good.
And then maybe take off the increase to ensure the quality of education and consumer protection.
Okay.
Sure.
Right.
That's good.
Looks good.
Mhm.
Great. All right. Does anyone need a moment to discuss or review, or are we ready to jump in?
You know, this is the area where the feedback was the most positive. So, you know, says it didn't come out in the weaknesses, but just for my personal, I just feel like the process that we undertake takes so much of our time and so much of our board meeting time that I do know that some boards use, you know, national accreditation as a basis for oversight, as opposed to reviewing every single small change in curriculum and at the level of, and requiring so many nursing education consultants that we can't even keep that many of them around, right? So I don't know if others agree, but that would be another thing that I would want to potentially investigate, whether, using accreditation, since so many, I think Lori, do you know the percentage of nursing programs in California that are accredited?
When CSA came in and did their audit of us, they said it was about 51 or 55%. I can get that number and give it to you specifically. Our NEC group just pulled up the reports that are found online, and they found out that the majority of the BSN programs that we do approve are accredited. However, that is not the same for our associate degree programs, and the majority of our associate degree programs, which is the largest portion of our pre-licensure approval, are not accredited. And then with the NCSBN report, it shows that the ADN accreditation is decreasing as well as the BSN over the last couple of years.
So I wonder if we established accreditation, if you had accreditation, because there is so much overlap, from what I understand, between what nursing schools do in order to, get accredited and maintain accreditation. That's very similar to what we do. That if they had that accreditation, then there would be a different type of review than if they didn't. I think that might be something that would really potentially save us a lot of time and provide people the opportunity to work on other things.
Absolutely. And that's something that we're looking on. There's not a lot of overlap, but there's a lot of symbiotic relationship there. And so if you look at the accrediting standards, most of them that say after board approval, this, based on board approval, this. And so we do the preliminary and they would do that extra level. We are looking to align our visits with accreditation, and that is a process that we have moving forward as well. So that'll go on the action items, and then you guys will get to see that on the way back.
Yeah, I was just thinking it's sort of similar to like when the Joint Commission or when they visit a hospital, they're there on behalf of the CMS. CMS still has oversight, but it's not both organizations coming in and doing an entire. But to me, there's some similarities that make sense.
There is some similarities, and I see that the board more closely aligns with CDPH. And so CDPH is the licensing facility, the approving facility for licensed healthcare, and then we are the approving facility for education. And then you would have CMS or TJC come in as part of the CDPH licensing, and then we would have CCNE or ASIN, which are the two ones that are approved and being aligned and used in California. And then that would be like having TJC or CMS come in. So you're absolutely correct, Dr. Fagan.
All right, so it sounds like we might have that action word align for this issue of accreditation.
Lori, how would you word the work that you said is already starting, or discussions that are already ongoing?
So we're using NCSBN's evidence-based approach to the aligning with accreditation. The benefit would be to, goodness, I'm sorry, I'm at a loss for words. Essentially, and Reza always helps me wordsmith, so I appreciate that if he can kind of listen to this. But what it would be to more appropriately utilize the NEC and their expertise. And that would allow us to, and I know this is verbose right now, I'm so sorry. It would allow us to really hone that process. And then it also has an effect on the deans and directors. The deans and directors right now have to create a report for the BRN, and they have to create a report for the accreditors.
Right.
And then they have two visits. They have us coming out to visit and them. So what we're doing right now is aligning our visit schedule with the accreditation schedule so that we will start scheduling with the accreditors. And we're looking into accepting the report that is written for the accreditation, and that has maybe an appendix that would offer the explanation to how they meet our individual regulation and statutes when it's not answered through the accreditation report. So, and we start that in the fall. Our first visits with San Diego City College, where we'll be doing a joint visit, and we're accepting their accreditation report to do our self-study evaluation off of. So that will be our first one.
What was the name of the college again, Lori?
San Diego City College is the one that we're doing in the fall. And it's with Dr. Heather Sands is the nursing education consultant assigned to that school, with Dee Armstrong being the director of nursing there.
Thank you.
So is the issue that we want to, is we say align, is it align the educational oversight activities with national accreditation programs? Is that correct? Is that sort of maybe a little more broadly than the very, very specifics about the visit schedule? That's what we're trying to do more broadly, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Educational oversight activities with national accreditation programs.
Yeah. So approval with accreditation, just aligning that. So that sounds right.
Would the benefit also be reducing redundancy?
Yes, it would.
To reduce redundancy and more appropriately utilize NECs?
Yeah, I like that.
Okay. So would you like us to put the reduce redundancies first and then have and to more appropriately utilize the NECs?
Yeah, I think by reducing redundancies, then we more appropriately utilize them.
Okay. Great.
And if we could maybe not use more appropriately utilized, because I believe that they are appropriately utilized, but I think if we could better utilize or streamline something
Okay.
to that effect.
So we could change it to better utilize maybe. Just saving. Okay.
What are your thoughts on that, Reza? Does that sound pretty clear without looking negative and being a positive as we're trying to say a benefit?
Yeah, I think it looks good. I also kind of had issue with the word more appropriately utilize NECs. Better, I think, is better, but I'll continue to think about it. If I come up with a better term than better, then maybe in the when this returns, when board staff review this, I can look into that. As it is right now, I think it's good. But if anything else comes to me, to wordsmith it.
To reduce better utilization. Shouldn't that be utilization of NECs?
And better utilization, then, yeah.
I don't know, I think we need a verb there.
And better use
Okay.
redundancy and better utilize, yeah.
I mean, you could use the word utilization, but you'd need to revise the structure
Got
of
it.
that part of the
Okay.
sentence.
Yeah.
And
Okay. Any other issues we'd like to address?
Clinical placements.
Okay, clinical placements.
I don't have a clue how to address it,
Okay.
but
Well, this is brainstorming, so it's okay to throw things out there and we'll see what we can do.
Could we put anything in here about supporting regional consortiums? Just
Okay.
to have more equitable clinical placements, right? Isn't that what we're trying to?
yeah.
Okay. And then the,
I think she said equitable.
okay, we'll get, I think, regional.
okay.
Support, it was support regional consortiums and then something to have more equitable clinical placements.
Yeah,
Okay. And so regional consortiums would be the issue. And I think it's looks like consortiums is what the word, it's pronounced consortiums, but it looks like consortiums, I think. So SORTIU, yeah. And if that's incorrect, please let me know, or let us know, please. Does that look good?
I like that.
This is Lori. My question is the regional consortiums the issue, or is it the clinical placement data that's the issue? And that the regional, supporting the regional consortiums would be an action item. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
So what is the issue that we're trying to look at here?
A lack of clinical placements.
So then
Oh,
we
yeah.
would probably put the issue to be clinical impaction or clinical displacement.
Okay,
I mean, I think reading the sentence from start to finish makes sense if you're not kind of looking at which box it fits in, whether action, issue, or benefit. Because you could probably say the same thing about the previous one, that educational oversight activities with national accreditation programs is that the issue? The issue was really the redundancy and all that. So, I mean, I think it makes sense the way it's written, even though it doesn't necessarily fit into the box there.
I agree. I just wasn't sure if people would see that as an issue. And I don't want it to look like a regional consortium as an issue.
Yeah,
These aren't
I
gonna
don't
be
think that's an
functions,
issue.
though, are they? It's going to be just a sentence, right, when we publish it?
yes, in the draft of the strategic plan and in the final strategic plan, these will all just be sentences, so you won't see action, issue, benefit. It'll just be a sentence. Support regional consortiums to have more equitable clinical placements.
Do we have
Okay,
to say
great.
something about the impaction? Because there's a clear either impaction or displacement. That's happening now.
Yeah, perhaps in the benefit. you
Just to
can say-
clarify it a little
right.
bit.
Maybe after placements and reduce impaction or reduce clinical impaction.
Clinical impaction.
Okay, so reduce clinical impaction. Okay.
Do we want to say something? I know we talk about this when we're looking at either a new nursing program or a program that wants to increase its enrollment, is that we make those decisions based on geographical need, or do we want to articulate that specifically in here? Because it comes up a lot, at least in my mind. It's like, oh, this is a successful program, but there's really not a need in that area. What do the rest of you think?
Clinical need, you're right, it comes up quite a bit.
Yeah.
So that would be workforce need. Is that correct? Versus clinical need, it would be workforce need and clinical availability.
Right. That's it. Because if there's, that whole assessment that was done by the region, and say where are regions that are, underserved in terms of nursing program availability, and where are those that they're impacted.
And so would your action verb be assess?
Yes.
Okay.
Can I go back to regional consortiums? I'm sorry. There's a lack of, correct? I mean, we don't have them. This is something that we've been trying to establish. So I'm not, we don't really have, I think in the San Diego area is the only one.
it's a few.
Aren't there others?
Yeah, there's a few.
There are a few regional consortiums. They are throughout the state. There's some up in San Jose, Orange County, Riverside, LA, San Diego, as you mentioned. There are multiple regional consortiums. The issue is getting the consortiums to be a benefit. The consortiums are only as good as the healthcare facilities that join them and stick to them. if an educational institution joins a consortium and the people that they, healthcare facilities that they partner with are not part of the consortium, it does not benefit that school to be a part of it and use the consortium. If the healthcare organization is making clinical arrangements outside of the consortium and not going strictly through the consortium, then again, it skews the data and it doesn't encourage the educational institutions to use the consortiums. So in order for regional consortiums to be a benefit, we have to have all of the healthcare facilities agree to use that consortium and only do clinical placements through that consortium. And so even though there are consortiums throughout the state, the way that the consortiums work are the ability for the consortiums to work to solve this problem are not there because there's no safeguards in place that require all of the healthcare facilities to utilize the consortium only for clinical placements.
Is there anything we can do as a board to require that?
Yeah.
We could seek legislation that would require the healthcare facilities to use and the educational institutions to use a consortium to do that. We don't have any statutory or regulatory authority at this point. And that would be kind of a fine line that we'd have to really kind of learn more about. Because right now, healthcare organizations are governed through CDPH, and we do the academic institutions. So it falls under the purview of two different state agencies.
Because sometimes even with the consortiums, they don't play with others, even though they're in their area. So it's kind of like they only allow certain schools. I don't know what we can do without maybe legislation.
Yeah, so
So I would like
California
to,
State-
I don't know how I would like to help and make sure that they're all playing together and working together.
In the California State Auditors, one of the recommendations to the legislator was to look into that, I believe.
All right, so do we still want to assess workforce need and clinical availability? And if so, what would be the benefit?
This would be for to support our decision-making regarding approval of new programs or program expansions.
Okay. Or program expansions. All right.
Lori, would we want to put anything in here that we would seek legislation? Is that something that we
The board has the ability to seek legislation. We would have to get a bill someone that would take the bill and then bring that forward. So we could do that. Again, though, we need to look at whether or not the legislation would fall under us, or whether it would be something that would go through CDPH. And I'm not sure what that particular process would be right now without looking at that a little bit further.
And just so you know, our next goal area is laws and regulations. So if you decide that you want to include that, then it might be something to put under laws and regulations, the goal area. Any other educational oversight issues?
I don't think we can walk away from talking about simulation.
Okay. All right. So the issue of simulation. Okay. And what action do we want to do?
I
Go ahead.
would just say something. I want to make sure what we would do would be that we use evidence-based data
Okay.
determining um, in determining, percentage or amount of simulation that should be allowed or supported,
Okay.
something like that.
So Mary, I would like to kind of help with this a bit, just because again, I know that the board has taken some strong opinions on this in the past. And so to make this neutral, and then to always also look at, we do not have any regulatory authority over simulation at this point. That is something that we are silent on. So what we establish is a minimum competency, a minimum standard essentially, and we talk only of direct patient care hours. And so that was, so right now we establish a direct patient care hours of 75% being in direct patient care of the 18 units that are required for licensure in a semester system. So we are silent on simulation, and in fact, the hours that are not in direct patient care are open to the school to do whatever they would want. That could be skills, that could be observation, that could be simulation, that could be anything as long as it meets the objectives of the curriculum. And so what we may want to do is look at this kind of backwards, where we look at establishing a baseline direct patient care, because then the school can do whatever they want to fill those other hours. And if they have the ability to do simulation, then they can use simulation. If they don't have the ability to do simulation, they can do a skills lab, or they can do case studies. They could do anything at that point. If we say specifically simulation, that ties the hands of academic institutions that do not have the resources, the faculty, or the funding to support that. And then remember, in our regulations, we're silent and we do not address simulation at all. We only address the minimum direct patient care.
All right. So do we want to say establish, was it a baseline of care?
So we established
Let's say
baseline and evidence.
minimum educational requirements for
Okay.
direct patient care.
Okay.
And then that way it leaves the simulation open. What are your thoughts on that one, Mary, since we don't have any regulation on
Or
simulation?
direct patient care.
I'm okay with it, but I would put, I want to make sure it says based on the evidence.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And that could be probably over in the benefit.
Mm-hmm.
Very similar to what we did with the compact wording, where we can establish like the pros and cons so that we can,
I think it was slide 41. Oh, no, it was license. I'm sorry, that would have been licensure. So slide 29-ish. There we go, 30. Thank you, co-moderator.
and that would be the drawbacks of decreasing the direct patient care requirement. Because that's the part that we would be changing in the regulation. Because again, we only speak to the direct patient care requirement. The other is silent.
This is as I watch you doing that, is establish in the action column, is that the right word? And I bring that up because I feel like we do have a baseline of direct patient care requirements. So I was thinking evaluate as well, but then we use that term in the benefit column. So
Of,
I like that.
Okay. So change the action to evaluate and then where it says benefit, we're replacing that word with to study, to consider.
evaluate based.
Determine.
Determine. to determine the benefits and drawbacks of decreasing the direct patient care requirement.
And then in the issue part, we want to put fit evidence-based in there somewhere, right?
Okay,
Right. Baseline, you should, yeah, just, you can take a baseline and evaluate baseline minimum educational requirements based on evidence, or for direct patient care based on evidence.
okay.
If we're looking to eliminate words to make it more concise, one way is to get rid of a baseline of. Unless people like that. But it seems like baseline and minimum kind of convey the same thing.
So what do we think about that? Just the more streamlined?
It's fine. That looks good.
It's good. All right. Okay. So if we're done with that, we can switch to public comment real quick. Does that sound good?
Yes.
Okay. Right, so I will open up the Q&A panel, and if any member of the public would like to comment on educational oversight objectives, please use the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen and type "I would like to make a comment," submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions for your reference, and we'll give you a moment. And I am not seeing any requests for public comment. Would you like me to go ahead and close the Q&A panel?
Sure.
Okay, it's
Thank
been
you.
closed. All right, so our next goal area is laws and regulation. And do we want to workshop the definition of laws and regulations, or are we okay with this?
Do we really have the authority to do this? I mean, we can recommend, right? But can we ensure? Rosa, maybe that's a question for you.
There's, I guess, a couple of things that come to mind in response to that. One is ensure. I guess at the end of the day, we can try, but ensure is another thing. But maybe what you had in mind was that statutes are kind of outside of our direct purview. We don't write the statutes, but we do have a hand in, making recommendations and advising the legislature with our position on statutes. I'm not sure, is that kind of what you were thinking, Mary, that piece about statutes being outside our?
Part of it that's law isn't,
Mhm.
that's not something we can control. We can have an opinion or we can support or not, but
Enforce.
lobby.
Yeah, no, I mean, you got a point that the statutes are not written by us. Still searching my brain for a solution that might take a bit, so.
Okay.
Do we take statutes out for now? And then say something separate about them?
It's a different word for enforce. That's basically what we do.
Okay.
Sure, is it regulations? And then we advocate for statutes, right? Or advocate, we take a position, I don't know.
So if we type "the board enforces" and then use the synonym functionality.
About implement, isn't that what we do?
So,
Yeah,
yeah, implement, administer.
well, we enforce the statutes, but we implement the regulations and policies and procedures, or
Okay,
but we don't just implement them, we determine and implement, right?
and enforces regulations.
That actually, that ensures could stay there now.
So one of those you implement and one of those you enforce. So is it statutes that you implement, or do you?
This is difficult because technically we enforce both our statutes and regulations,
Okay,
but we only have a hand in drafting our regulations.
okay,
So by the way, I don't have anything off the top of my head, and I'm still thinking, but if anyone, I think it's fair if anyone had something that they wanted to start from scratch with, and not necessarily bound to this as our starting point.
Ensures that regulations, policies, and procedures are implemented. No, that's too many words.
Ensures and enforces statutes. And
One thought, thinking out loud, so maybe you could just, our moderator can type this out and see if it's any good. The board enforces the laws in its purview. We can take the thesaurus to that later, comma, I think it's, and then board enforces laws within its purview. No, the first and, yeah. No, strike that.
okay. So it's the board enforces the laws within its
Within.
purview.
Correct.
Okay.
Comma, and establishes regulations to ... And it could be to strengthen and support their mission. To me, the mandate and the mission are kind of synonymous. Also, regulations, policies, and procedures are synonymous. So I don't see a need to kind of, list those in a string. Now, that was, again, just thinking off the top of my head, just a thought in order to give us an alternative to
Sure. Thank you
so
very much.
everyone, please feel free to
That's a good start. That's good.
rip that apart, reject it, whatever you think is best.
do you think we're missing that piece of, weighing in, right, on proposed legislation, or, right? Because to me, I see that a big part of what we do.
You could, again, thinking off the top of my head here, but, okay, so revising that second one, the board enforces the laws within its purview, comma, delete the word and.
Provides.
The board enforces the laws within its purview, establishes regulations, comma, and advocates for sensible legislation. And again, take the thesaurus to sensible if you'd like. Or use a different word with a different connotation.
Do we have to put sensible, or can we just put
No, not at all. Well, I
have to go outside.
I think it's fine without sensible.
That's definitely more inclusive, I think, of what we do versus the laws with established regulations.
I'm fine with that.
Okay,
But it probably should be its mission as opposed to their mission.
there.
Yeah.
And just a thought, not, the board enforces the laws within its purview, establishes regulations, and advocates for legislation to carry out its mission.
Yeah,
Okay.
or to, I want to say, effectively carry out its mission? Or does that? It can go without it.
That would work for me.
Would you put it in?
We'll give it a look. Are we good?
That works for me.
It works.
Okay, great, thank you. All right. So what are the issues with laws and regulations? I know earlier you were talking about some law that you might want to support.
I think that one was the licensure compact, if I remember.
Okay, yep, okay. And I know, just looking
That's
at the
a
environment. Oh, go ahead.
bill that's already out there. Is this where we would take action based on board position to support or oppose? Or is this where the BRN would bring forth legislation, or where the BRN would update regs?
It would be all of that. So this goal area would include all of that.
I mean, we already addressed the nurse licensure compact in the previous.
I was
We
just going to ask
did.
that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't think it belongs here.
Sure. I do see in looking at the environmental scan, the stakeholders are wanting more education on laws and regulations. They suggest updating outdated laws and regulations, clarifying them. So those are just some ideas for issues.
One of the things that jumped out to me on this, the stakeholder feedback, was the one that said, the stakeholders feel the board is too political and bureaucratic in laws and regulations and believe it deprives them of a voice in the laws and regulation process. And I do think it's important for us to make some sort of statement about being neutral to special interests as we do this work. I don't know how we word it, but
Or another action could be communicate neutrality on special interests.
Would this mean that if my union is proposing some kind of bill, that because I'm part of that union, I should abstain from it, from voting? Could be.
I think that's a separate discussion, you know, we
Okay.
ought to take up if it becomes a reality, but
I think this is what we're getting at. I mean, basically, special interests. I mean, you know, have a union that's pushing for certain bills, regulation, and I am a member of that union that I should probably abstain. I mean, I'm thinking, but anyways, I'm just thinking out loud.
Yeah, I mean, to me,
I
it's,
don't think it's so much as abstaining, Imelda.
and to me, I would want to say is that we ensure that our decisions or recommendations are based on what's best for public, and not unnecessarily influenced by special interests.
I guess my question when I first heard special interest is to make sure we're defining what that means, because
Mhm.
a lot of us are part of organizations that are grassroots people movement, and they're not necessarily, you know, something else that is easily defined in a special interest group. So I just want to be really careful that we're not categorizing communities of color workers in that same concept.
Right, that's a great point.
I don't know that we want to use special interests. But oh, this is a tough one.
Okay.
And does do others feel like it's important to have something like this in here, or is it just me?
I think the concern that you read off is valid, and that we should probably create a statement around.
I was gonna read off a thought again off the top of my head. I don't know if it's would necessarily fit in this box or just be a separate one or not included at all, but something along the lines of ensure that all stakeholder voices are heard and
Given equal
Consideration.
consideration. Yeah.
And do we want that to be the benefit?
The benefit might be to
somehow to involve equity.
How about to promote
equitable.
inclusiveness and equity, or
I was going to say to better inform board decisions or something like that. Board policy, better inform board policies, or the idea, the benefit in my mind of letting everyone be heard is we've got all of the information, we've got more information to make decisions.
okay.
Yeah, I like that. Because that has been something that has troubled me. I felt like we've gotten a lot of input from a lot of organizations whose opinions, you know, perspectives I value, but it doesn't appear that we, you know, our decisions don't necessarily reflect that, and I'm not sure why.
Okay. Is there another issue you'd like to consider?
I think the one that was pointed out in the environmental scan about outdated laws is,
Okay.
I mean, I could think of at least one off the top of my head in our regs that,
Okay.
but just something, I mean, I think that's a pretty
Okay.
non-divisive, you know.
What are you thinking of, Rosa?
As far as what's outdated,
Uh-huh.
it would probably require a pretty thorough review to, you know, give you a list. But one that has always kind of grabbed my attention was it's 16 CCR 1410.1, where subsection D says the board's actual time periods for processing an application for original licensure as a registered nurse, ... were as follows, and then it proceeds to list, 11 days, 62 days, 332 days. That regulation was last updated, I think, in 1991.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but it's so old, and it's citing the current timeframes from 30 years ago
So,
for
but,
processing rate. That was just,
but we don't have the authority to change the law, right? So our role
That-
in this would be, right, for advocating for sensible.
Well, we're
so,
talking about the regs in the Nurse Practice Act too, aren't we?
yeah, so a couple of things. First of all, when I hear the term laws, to me, that encompasses statutes and regulations. Our regs, even though we write them, have the force of law, so they are law. But I understand the point that, by just saying eliminating outdated laws or revising outdated laws, it's kind of sweeping over the fact that we don't actually directly change statutes ourselves. So that may be something we can kind of,
But if we just see regulations, does that include what we have responsibility and oversight for?
so what you can do, you can directly change regulations, and like we just discussed on the last one, we can advocate for updated laws if we think there are outdated statutes. So I don't know if you want to kind of keep this limited to regulations, since that's directly in our control, but you do also have the means to advocate if there are statutes.
Yeah,
I think
should that be?
the one I
two,
mentioned is,
do you think?
Hmm.
I like that. I think it makes sense that it be two different.
Separate, yeah. And do you want to have update, or do you want to have review and update if necessary?
Probably the second.
Probably
Okay.
review an update.
Or
Yeah.
you know what? But we've already said they're outdated. Or maybe just
Yeah.
regulations.
But we would review them and update it, so we would do both.
To ensure that they're current and
I know there's one that I would like to change, the Ettinger, the reduced costs. Oh, we're reducing costs all the time. I think that one needs to be changed. But yeah, well, that's just,
I think that's case law. That's neither up to
we,
us.
I know, I wish that case law, we need to find another case law.
All right, so are we good with that benefit to ensure that they are current?
I don't think it reads as a sentence. I don't know if that's something you want to address now or later on when this is actually written up. You might say review regulations,
review regulations.
update.
Update if necessary.
So review regulations and update if necessary, yeah.
I'm having a hard time fitting it within, this
Yeah.
three-column framework, but I think we all
I
kind of,
think we've got the intent.
yeah.
Yes, yes. And then the next one, to advocate for statutes.
I think that would also maybe start with a review from us.
Okay.
And then if there are review
Okay.
statutes, and advocate for updates if necessary.
Okay,
And then would we also want to say that we would want to potentially advocate for new statutes if we thought that would be helpful?
So I think we're taking on two different concepts there. One is outdated regulations, and then like the one I read off, that was a regulation, and that was obviously just anachronistic. It was out of date. New statutes, you could be implementing a new statute in order to kind of catch up with the times, or to take a totally different. I think you could talk about new statutes, but that might, in my mind, be a separate line item.
Yeah, no, I was suggesting a separate line item. And then maybe it's not review, it would be either suggest or advocate for.
Okay. So the action would be advocate. And this would be,
For statutes to address unmet needs, or I don't know. How would you phrase something like that, Reza? Opportunities or?
This is the co-facilitator. Can I chime in, facilitator?
oh, please do.
For objectives that address current challenges that need to be addressed. If it's a business as usual, we don't typically add those as objectives, Tricia.
That is correct. So if it's something that your board is going to do as part of day-to-day business, then typically it wouldn't be included in the strategic plan.
And I believe we do, if I'm not mistaken, right, Lori?
I'm not aware of it if we're doing it, but maybe I just haven't experienced that yet in my tenure.
Is legislation part of statutes?
Yeah, legislation becomes statutes. The comment that was just made about not doing, not including things that are kind of routine for us and every day, is that, did you have in mind kind of that fourth line item or more of these items?
Is it redundant to have advocate as the fourth line item and have it up in the issue on the third line item that we are advocating? Can we maybe, or we want to separate it?
I think what we had as the difference was the last one would be new, right? Like we just talked about something and I can't remember exactly what it was. We said that would be helpful if we had, it was about the consortiums. Whether we wanted to advocate for some sort of legislation that would require, regions have consortiums and
Is that a
hospitals.
statute? Would that be a
It
statute?
would have to be in statute. If we were to deal with consortiums, that would have to come in the form of statute. And the difference between lines 3 and 4, kind of like what Mary was saying, is that the third one is to deal with outdated statutes, and the fourth one is new statutes to address unmet areas. I mean, I think Mary was kind of in favor of line 2 and 3 being separate items. I could conceive of some kind of way to combine those two, since they are kind of on the same topic of outdated laws. The reason we split it up, I think, is just due to we're having a hard time coming up with the wording, given that regs are directly in our control and statutes are only something that we can advocate for someone else to do something about.
Got it.
Okay.
But if, later on when this comes back to staff, I can think of if there is some way to combine 2 and 3, and then later on that can be something that you are given an option, whether you like it more this way or that way.
So for that third one where it says statutes and advocate for updates, do you want to put this is just throwing it out there, a slash after updates and just say new statutes?
To clarify it a little.
Right.
Better.
So you might want to update existing statutes, but you also might find that there's a need for a new one after reviewing the existing statutes.
Advocate for updates for new statutes. Yeah, that would work, won't it? And on all these, the benefit is to ensure they are current and based on best practice too, right?
I mean, it sounds good to me. You have a delineation there. I think that, and then the wordsmithing, like, as you said, will probably help it to sound a little better.
Okay. And then shall we get rid of the fourth one?
I think that covers it for me.
Okay.
Open
All right.
public comment.
Okay. All right. We'll open for public comment. Just. All right, so I will open up the Q&A panel, and if any member of the public would like to make a comment on laws and regulation objectives, please type. I would like to make a comment using the field in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. We are displaying instructions for your reference, and we'll give you a moment to access this feature. All right, we have Cheryl Goddard Greenwood who would like to make a comment. You have 2 minutes and you've been unmuted.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Goldfarb Greenwood. I'm a clinical nurse specialist, and I'm the president of California Association of Clinical Nurse Specialists. And I was wondering if you would want to add something about promulgating regulation based on new statutes, such as the work that's been done for APRNs or is in the process of being done for APRNs in California related to AB 890 and SB 1237.
All right, I'm not seeing any further requests for public comment. Would you like me to go ahead and close the Q&A panel?
Sure, thank you.
Okay.
I think that recommendation about promulgating based on new statutes makes a lot of sense. Clearly, that's work we've been doing.
I'm curious, this is Reza, I'm curious whether board members would want to, if we decide to include something along those lines, have it be generic, like promulgating regulations in response to new statutes, or something specifically targeting AB 890, given that that's several years of that we're going to continue to work on that.
I would advocate for generic, but
Yeah, because we're talking about this strategic plan going into 2025, and who knows what else is going to come up, right?
I agree.
And this is Trisha, and I just want to make sure that we're not going into the territory of day-to-day functions too. So we have our goal areas and what we want to accomplish in those goal areas, but we don't want to just list out what the board always does. And Elizabeth, if you have a better way of saying that, please jump in.
This is Elizabeth, you got it.
Okay, thank you.
I guess that's very true. That is sort of day-to-day business, huh?
All right.
Is it that we promulgate, or is it how we promulgate that we would want to create some sort of like being inclusive and equitable when we do that, right?
So if there's an issue that you need to address, you know, under laws and regulations, then you would want to include it here.
Yeah, well, I know we were definitely received criticism that we were not, we didn't make some of the decisions based on the committee or the council or the group for the advanced practice for the nurse practitioners. That
Okay.
it wasn't diverse enough and didn't include, different areas of the state. And so that, maybe that's one thing we want to say is we definitely want to try to do more of that as we go forward.
Okay. And it looks like your first one kind of takes care of that, 'cause you're ensuring that all stakeholder voices are heard and given equal consideration. So would that cover what you're thinking, or do you feel another objective needs to be added?
Yeah, is it just policies, or would we want to include another term that would be more broad?
Okay.
I can't think what it should be, but it feels like that's just related to policies, and which we probably shouldn't be. Reza, is that the word? What word do you think we want to use to be more inclusive of the types of decisions that we would make?
Word to be, I'm sorry, can you help me out here a little bit? What are you looking for?
Yeah, well, we were talking about what criteria we would use and ensure that we used when we were, promulgating regulations based on new statutes. But if we were to include that and have that be included in the number one, where we ensure that all stakeholder voices are heard and given equal consideration, the benefit would be for better informed policies and regulations, or
To me, regulations and policies are synonymous,
are they?
more or less. I mean,
Okay.
at least as far as, the way the Administrative Procedure Act looks at regulation. I think policies is part of the definition of regulations in the APA.
Maybe we should change policies and regulations, because at least to me, regulations seems a little more broad. I don't know if that's just me, but.
Laws and regulations. That's what we're doing here.
I think I think you could say laws and regulations, but the laws, if by laws you have in mind statutes, those are not, we're not allowed to write those ourselves.
Okay. So do you want better informed policies and regulations? Is that better?
Reza, correct me if I'm wrong, but our regulations are our policies. Is that correct? If we had separate policies that could be considered underground regs, or am I wrong on that?
Right. So part of the definition of regulations is policies, procedures, standards of general application, ... So in a sense, they are kind of synonymous. I think it would be fine either with policies alone or regulations alone, or policies and regulations. The last one, though, saying policies and regulations, just know that if you adopt that wording, you are being a little bit redundant in that policies and regulations are, in some sense, in a legal sense under the APA, the same. And also, like Lori brought up, our policies had better be in regulation, otherwise they are underground regulations. So to say policies and regulations, one could argue that that phrasing suggests there is some distinction between policies and regulations, and that, that suggests we have policies that are not in reg, which we That's, we're not saying that we have policies outside of regulation. That's, again, that if you really like the wording policies and regulations, I'd be fine with it. Somebody out there could, kind of misconstrue that along the lines of what I was just describing, but for my part, I'm fine with any of the variations.
All right, so do you want to, so do we want to change it for better informed regulations? Just to be on the safe side? Do we want to do that?
Why don't we just leave it
Got
like
it.
that for better informed policies?
Okay,
Yeah, I'm about 50-50 between policies or regulations, and I
Okay.
probably would not go for the both.
well, when you consider the draft, that you can revisit this and decide. So,
It's good.
okay, great. So our next goal area is organizational development. And do we want to change this goal statement at all? Or do we want to leave it?
I mean, I think we strive to be excellent, but I think we could do away with that excellent organization.
Okay.
We would like to think that
Is
we're
this something
excellent.
that we continually strive for? Strive to build. Love the S.
Drives to build.
Excellent. I mean, it's that is our goal and we're trying to move toward that, but is excellent too lofty?
I think so.
I agree it is.
Do you want to say maybe strong? The board strives to build a strong organization.
By the way, just clarifying I was agreeing with Imelda. I think if you add strives to, like what Dolores suggested, that takes care of the loftiness that I
Oh,
was
okay.
concerned about. So sorry about that.
Okay. Okay, so we're okay with strives to build an excellent organization. Okay.
And those are good alternatives to excellent as well. So
Yeah, I think excellent's appropriate here.
Okay, good.
Effective.
Rest of it looks fine to me.
Mhm.
Okay.
The only thing that I question a little bit is proper board governance. What is that what
Can
the
we just say through board governance? Because proper is probably subjective.
So just get rid of proper and have through board governance, effective leadership. Can we put an Oxford comma in after leadership? And responsible
yay,
management.
Oxford comma.
Yes, thank you. All right.
Just for my own sake, I was okay with the word proper. It jumps out at me, but when we're using the word effective to describe leadership, to Mary, I agree. I kind of scratch my head a little bit as to what proper board governance, what exactly that means, but the word proper didn't trouble me as much given that we're already describing our leadership as effective and our management as responsible. So it just seemed weird to not have an adjective there.
Right.
Or I won't say weird, it just seemed like maybe
Right.
something might have been missing.
Or we could say through effective and responsible board governance,
I
leadership,
like
and
responsible.
management.
Okay. So
That's a
effective
good-
and responsible board governance, comma, leadership, comma, and response and management.
Okay.
How's that?
That works.
All right. Great. So are we ready to look at some issues we want to address?
There's definitely issues about communication.
Continued education for board members.
Okay. Continued education for board members.
Lack of organization.
I think Mary, with the communication, there's a little bit of, I don't want to say it's a restriction, but with Bagley Keene in place. What do you think, Reza?
I'm sorry, I was on mute. I was flipping through the environmental scan when you were asking your question, Dolores. Would you restate it, please?
Oh, Mary brought up communication, which is a definite, I think that's a definite issue. Part of that has to do with Bagley Keene.
Well, it depends on what you mean by communication. Bagley Keene, of course, restricts your communication amongst yourselves, board members. If there are other types of communication that you may have in mind here, whether it's communication from the board to the public, or communication from the board to board management, or board management to staff, or there's what type of communication are we talking about? Obviously, communication amongst yourselves is a Bagley Keene issue, but
And this is Trish, if I can just jump in. I'm looking at the environmental scan, the communication that is being spoken of is the stakeholders wanting more dialogue with the board. They want their feedback to be asked for more often.
so more than every single agenda item, every single meeting.
Correct. So maybe increased dialogue with stakeholders.
Yeah, I think that would be a really good idea.
I am fine with that. But I'm sorry to keep chiming in, but the reason I'm a little hung up on the word increased is that it kind of suggests that we are not communicating with our stakeholders. And just from what I've seen from my own perspective, I see, like I just kind of hinted, we invite the public to speak at every meeting on every agenda item. Lori has said during our meetings many times, send written comments to her. She's remained open to all that stuff. I know Lori spends a great deal of her time engaging with stakeholders. So to kind of suggest that we are not currently communicating with stakeholders, just rubs me a certain way. That's not to say that we can't do better and we can't do more communication, but I was a little just.
I think the biggest issue is that it sounds like the stakeholders are saying that they're not feeling it. So we might be thinking that we're doing it, but if it's not received that way, then there's an opportunity for us to improve, right?
Sure.
The more about
so
not being transparent.
So the benefit could be to increase transparency.
What are we talking about as far as transparency? Like, is there a situation that you have in mind? Just to clarify what our response would be to this.
So if we're not communicating, but if we're not being transparent, then that could be seen as not communicating. We're transparent in what we're doing. Maybe they wouldn't feel so out of it, or left out of what we're doing.
And the stakeholders do appreciate their email updates. What they're seeking is just more to be asked for their feedback more often.
And I think we've already talked about this, but when we get their feedback, to really carefully, consider it. An example, Dolores, to your question about it, a specific example when I think we could have been more transparent, was back to the decision about who was going to be on the advisory group for the NP, group for the, the legislation. That there was definitely concern that we were not transparent, and there was,
Yeah, I remember that.
I talked about that.
Also within the board, I've said this many times, that there needs to be an agenda item for closed sessions, whether, or whatever we want to call it. But there's things that we don't know or find out until we're in session. These things are thrown at us and we're unprepared. We don't know that these things are going on, or we're blindsided as a board member. Sometimes I know that because of the Big Keene Act, we can't. But if we put it on the agenda and we have these conversations, then I would feel like we're all part of the decision making. We're all part of the board.
Can I jump in and ask for some clarification, Imelda? Can just flesh out a little bit more, please? What do you have in mind with this agenda item for closed session?
Well, oftentimes, it's like the chair or co-chair, the presidents. I mean, they have these closed sessions with the BRN, the director, and we're kept out of the loop. And we usually find out maybe at one of the meetings, committee meetings, or maybe at the admin meeting, we find out things that we weren't unaware, and we're like shocked.
So, go ahead. I don't want to interrupt you, but okay, I'll respond to that real briefly. Couple things. The word closed session, I am concerned that could, that's closed session means something very specific under the Open Meeting Act, and what you are describing is not that type of closed session. But I understand what you're describing and what's going on there. This is, also for the sake of members of the public who are listening to this. What you kind of described there is our admin committee, which is the board president and vice president, who are appointed by the board and who are authorized by the board to have those kinds of discussions with board management and DCA leadership and things like that outside of board meetings. And that's kind of the point of the admin committee, to address kind of or weigh in, or what have you, on day-to-day kinds of things. Of course, the point is not to keep those kind of things from other board members. Our restriction, as you know, is that we can't get all the board members in one place or on one phone call or even on one email. I mean, there are ways to communicate things out, and we may be able to do a better job of communicating those types of things that the admin committee are involved in with the other board members. As you know, there are restrictions in your ability to engage in dialogue about that type of stuff. You can't go back and forth outside of a meeting, but there may be room to keep board members apprised of things like that a little more. But those are, of course, not closed sessions in the sense of that we usually use that term. And I'm not sure whether that's something that we can just strive to do outside of having it be a strategic plan goal. Or, I think your point is noted regardless of whether it's in our plan or not. So
I feel exactly the same way, that that there are things that come up at a board meeting, or when I see, the night before something will get mailed. That's really important, but there's just not the time to review it to be able to even ask good questions. So if there's some commitment that we probably should, say that maybe it's again, I don't want to investigate, really an investigation, but what
maybe
opportunities do we have to improve communication while making sure that, we're not doing anything that we're, not allowed to do with Bagley-Keene Act. So I don't know what that is, but I really want it to be better.
Sure. I believe the meeting materials are posted way ahead of time.
Oh, no.
No.
Oh.
Okay. I see they said they're posted ahead of time.
Aside from, we could do better posting materials sooner, and I think we have gotten better and will continue. But I think what's being discussed is not necessarily things that are, agenda items.
It's
Those
not
are-
agenda items. It's this, the supplementary information that's where the meat of it is, right? It's having enough time to really digest that. In fact, I almost flipped off my seat when I saw the documentation for this, which was
Right,
638 pages, and I'm like, oh my God.
Exactly.
It turned out that most of it wasn't meaty, but I thought, how in God's creation are we to be prepared for a strategic planning session if we've got 2 days to review 600 and something pages?
Yeah, and I can just add to that, the ELC stuff, it's an average of 300 pages of documentation. And that's very difficult to get ahead of that.
So how do we want to address this?
Well, are we talking about, is the issue that meeting materials are not posted with sufficient time for board members to review?
I don't think it's just,
So
that's a
we-
piece of it, I think, but I think we also need to explore additional opportunities for board members to communicate about important topics that's not going to violate Bagley-Keene.
To me, the answer is pretty obvious to that. It's board meetings. That's all.
That's the only,
Well, again, there could be one-way communications where, Loretta reports out to all of you or something like that, but that's,
maybe that's
that's it.
what,
You don't,
yeah, maybe that's what it needs to be.
I think that's a good idea.
is that something that you think is for our strategic plan, or again, something that maybe you just want Loretta to know?
About reporting out, what exactly do you, I just want to get it clear, clarification. What would you like to see reported out to each of you? Because if we can facilitate this, I'd like to know.
So here's an example, Dolores, the information about the sunset review. Another area that it came out very late for the first one. It was posted and that's so important, right? Posted at like 10 o'clock at night. And I know, Loretta, that you had barriers that kept you from being able to do it, but what opportunities, there's got to be a better way. So I don't know if that means picking up the phone to say, or sending an individual message to say, I don't know what it is, but it just makes it very difficult to be an effective board member.
I believe in that instance, we didn't receive the information till literally the day or night before.
That's true, Dolores.
Yeah.
That is true on that one.
And I didn't have a board member present at the hearing.
Couple of things. When you say we didn't have the information, I assume you're saying the board didn't have the information until the night before. The board staff and management, just on this particular example, I'm not saying this is not an issue, but on this particular example, we were waiting for the legislative committee staff to provide their background paper to us so that we could, and Lori, please correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't want to, shift the accountability here if that's not accurate. But
We didn't receive the background paper until the afternoon before the sunset hearing. And then it was immediately sent out to the board members as soon as it was received. The sunset paper additionally was not, the background paper came from the legislators and it was posted on their website. That was not for us to post. And it's still posted on the website, not on ours, because that's their background paper. So that part we did not have control over. But I do have a question on process, Reza. If I'm reporting out to the admin committee on a regular basis, and I report that same information then out to board members via email, does that violate the serial communication, or is that something that is acceptable?
That's acceptable. If you report something out to the admin committee and all the board members, that's fine. If, say, I'm just picking one person at random, only because her face is on my screen here. If Imelda then responds to your email and either replies all to all board members, which wouldn't happen because we usually use BCC, but if she did that, or if Imelda then, sent an email to, other board members and said, hey, in response to what Lori said, this is how I feel, that kind of thing, then you got a serial. But Lori, the short answer to your question, that would be fine. That one-way communication from board staff to board members.
And then documents that are shared, information that's shared, since it's shared to the entire board, would we then have to post it on our website as public materials, or how would I manage that?
So the technical rule from the Open Meeting Act, the short answer to that is probably not. You're required to post, let me get the exact wording, which will take just 1 second. Agendas of public meetings and other writings, when distributed to all or a majority of all the members of state body by any person in connection with a matter subject to discussion at a public meeting, are disclosable. So, and shall be made available. So basically what that says, and this is from Government Code 11125.1a, that says that if you distribute basically meeting materials to a majority of the board members, you have to post them. If you're distributing materials, again, in the language of the statute, that on a matter of discussion or consideration at a public meeting. So if it's not really something that relates to an agenda item for an upcoming meeting, and you send out, say, a report or whatever it is to all of our board members, the way I read this statute and the way I interpret it, that's fine.
So you're referring to administrative items, right? Not something that we've got to take action on. It's okay to distribute to the board members. Is that correct?
So let me give a couple examples just to, I'm hoping I understand correctly. So let's say, 2 weeks ahead of a board meeting, Lori sends something out to all board members that says, hey, at our board meeting, we're going to be talking about X, and here's a report that's pertinent to that.
Oh, yeah.
That is a document that is in connection with a matter subject to discussion at a public meeting of the body. That has to be made available to the public as meeting materials. On the other hand, in a different example, say we're in between 2 board meetings and Lori sends something out that to all board members that just may be of interest to the board members, or maybe it's something that she thinks that they just ought to be aware of, then I think it's arguable, at least, that document is not something that's in connection with a matter subject to discussion or consideration at a public meeting. And in that case, it's fine. She doesn't necessarily need to make it available as meeting materials. Now, one other point is, again, this is kind of more for our members of the public. If you're kind of hearing this conversation and thinking we're sending stuff back and forth and trying to, keep it from the public, that's not at all what's happening. We don't seek to keep records from the public, but pretty much all these records are public. So if there is anything that members of the public ask for, there's the Public Records Act, which allows them to request records. So the Open Meeting Act says that basically meeting materials have to be provided to the public. The Public Records Act also says that most state records are available to the public upon request. So getting back to Lori's question, if it's not something that's meeting materials or, kind of directly related to something that's going to be discussed at an upcoming meeting, then that document is not, those are not meeting materials that would get posted, on our website next to that meeting. I hope that helps. I hope I didn't confuse you more.
Can I give an example that I think, and we actually did eventually get it to our folks, because I think, and Lori helped me out here, I think we had already actioned off maybe a year or two about the new phone system. And I know that in our administrative meetings, we talked about it a little bit when it was coming online. And that could have been, I'm just using that as an example. I'm not saying we did anything wrong, but that probably would have been something that would have benefited the board members. Just a note about the system, what it's going to be doing, and that you would provide follow-up information at our next board meeting. But it's not an action item. It's something that's been approved all the way down the road sometime. But it's information that the board members probably could use.
Yeah, and my understanding was that came out in executive officer report at the board meetings that we're having every 3 months. And just to be clear with that, the phone system was implemented from the time that we got okay on it,
Yes.
that DCA presented it and said, hey, we have this available to you. We're gonna, are you in? And we said, yes, we're in. They had it out in about a month and a half. So it moved quite quickly. But now that I have a better understanding from what Reza said, where I can share out information that was on my executive officer's report, that is an agenda item. But if I can share that out in advance of that, I'm happy to do that. But the issues that have been coming up against is trying to manage Bagley-Keene. When we have a licensing update on the ELC and the board meeting, we have enforcement update on the ELC and the board meeting. These are agenda items. We have an executive officer's report on every board meeting. Those are agenda items. So really trying to find out what we can do without violating Bagley-Keene to get it out to all board members when I do meet with the administrative team. But I guess I'll just go to Reza more and find out more what is able to be shared, because we do have standing agenda items for licensing update, enforcement update, and the executive officer's report. So those are all agenda items. And so if I'm giving out information towards those agenda items, and that information then needs to be publicly presented, is my understanding, versus just an email out to the board members.
Can those reports be written reports as opposed to verbal, and then they would be posted in advance of the meeting so we'd have a chance to review them and be prepared if we had questions or comments?
Executive officer's report, or the licensing report, or enforcement, or all of them?
All of them.
Yes, we can do that.
That would be open.
That'd be really helpful.
All right, so for the issue of continuing education for board members, what action would be like? Provide? Just throwing that out there.
I'm not sure what this one refers to.
I think Ken suggested.
Yeah, I just, it was just an idea. I feel that for us to be a better board, having continued education, orientations. I understand the pandemic, it kind of messed things up, but I think that we would benefit our ability to be better leaders and managers if we got education, review education every so once in a while on functions that the board does. I think it would help us better understand some of the problems that we have to solve. That was my only idea behind that.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah. What types of education, just so I want to make sure I understand, are you thinking about? Like an example?
Oh,
Well, like an example, I just went through with Jessica, I guess, I don't know if I can say her name, but on doing discipline and different types of discipline and terms. I mean, that would be one example. I know that some of the newer board members also went through that with her.
yeah, and just like another example, when you first come on the board, you do get some training from DCA on how the legislation works. But having somebody from our staff to talk to us about that, going into a little more detail every once in a while, I think would be very beneficial.
Okay, that sounds great.
Aside from continuing education, I think outreach. I think it would be nice for some of us board members to visit some of these schools, like ELAC, and see. I mean, outreach to me would also be important, especially like in the areas where I live, the schools that are in my area. I don't know if you guys want to include
Isn't
outreach.
section? It's on outreach, right?
We
Yep,
have an outreach.
our next goal area is outreach. So
Nice.
Imelda, you're ahead of us. So, but we're almost there. We're almost there. So my co-facilitator and I try to capture the thinking behind this one. We put a benefit there. I don't know if that fits or not. If you could let us know.
That's pretty good.
That sounds
Okay. So do we like these objectives? Are we good with them? I'm not hearing any protests, so I will quickly go to trying to go up to the top so I can open up public comment before we move on to our very last goal area. So apologize, my mouse is not cooperating very well. Okay, here we go. All right, so I will just open up the Q&A panel. So if any member of the public would like to provide any feedback or comment on organizational development, I have opened up the Q&A panel. So you can type that you would like to make a comment and submit it to all panelists. We are displaying instructions for your reference, and we'll give you a moment. All right, so we do have a public member that has written a comment. So hold on here, I'm trying to, okay. All right, so we have a public member that says their microphone isn't working. Is it okay if I read their comment?
Yep.
Okay, all right, so it's clarify the role of the board's legal counsel to ensure counsel is acting and providing information within the scope of the position. In the meetings I've attended, counsel has provided personal opinions on agenda items as opposed to only advising the board on, on legal issues. For example, during the discussion regarding dismantling the APRN committee, the board's legal counsel stated that the APRN, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to read that, and it's a very small window. All right. For example, during the discussion regarding dismantling the APRN committee, the board's legal counsel stated that the APRN committee was not needed and was redundant to the nurse practitioner. So I'm just, and then because he reviewed the minutes and all they talked about was AB 890, that's a personal opinion, not a legal matter.
I guess this one is directed towards me, so I'm going to take a second and reread this. Anyone else? who has any thoughts on this or critique bear with me though, I'm going to review this.
Okay.
Okay, specifically about this example that they brought up, saying that I advised the board that the APRN committee and the Nurse Practitioner Advisory Committee are redundant. If any of the board members took that only that message away, then I apologize, and please let me know if that was the impression you got. However, I think I was pretty clear that that a portion of what the APRN committee right now is doing, and for the last several months, is redundant with what the Nurse Practitioner Advisory Committee's mandate is. The specific thing that I talked about was that it would be redundant to have both advising the board about AB 890, which in and of itself is fine. I was never saying that the APRN Advisory Committee should not deal with AB 890. However, the message that I made very clearly was that the board can't proceed with regulations on AB 890 without the Nurse Practitioner Advisory Committee weighing in. So what was going on was there were a lot of stakeholders who were really just trying to push the BRN to, implement this thing. The statute, the bill that the legislature, excuse me, the bill that the legislature passed said that the NP Advisory Committee must advise the board on all matters relating to nurse practitioner practice. So I think pretty clearly advised the board that the Nurse Practitioner Advisory Committee needs to weigh in, and you can't go forwards with only the APRN Advisory Committee's recommendations. So maybe I confused the entire board, or maybe just this individual or some other folks out there, and I apologize if I did, but I don't think practitioner are completely redundant. The APRN committee is not necessary. I could talk a lot about that, but turning to the general comment that this person made, that I provide opinion and not strictly counsel on legal matters. If any other board members have a problem with that, I do try to stay, in my lane as legal counsel and advise on the law. If other board members feel that I'm kind of getting outside of my lane, please tell me either at the time, or please feel free to tell me after the fact if you don't want to do it kind of in that setting, or if you want to do it anonymously, you can relay it to Loretta, who can, speak with me. But this is, the first time I'm hearing a complaint that I'm overstepping my role as legal counsel and providing opinion. Of course, I've given you lots of opinions today about, wordsmithing and things like that. But if you feel like I'm going outside my role and giving opinion and not just sticking to my lane, please let me know. But unfortunately, I answer to this board, and I do my job as best I can to assist this board. And so if this board has issues, I will absolutely take them into consideration and do everything I can to improve. But I think what happens a lot of times, people or members of the public just don't like what I have to say. And then they, then it comes off as, that I'm not a person who should be saying that, rather than dealing with the substance of it. And one last piece, just kind of closing, there are a lot of times when there's a big, wide gray area between what is, what's a legal issue and what's a policy issue. I try not to venture into the policy arena and say that this is the policy the board should press. I stay out of that. That's the board members who are, required to do that. But a lot of times there are legal issues that tie into policy decisions, and I might raise one of those legal issues for your consideration, and that legal issue may kind of steer you in one direction or the other. That's not me trying to steer your policies just because I, feel that because I have an opinion about the policy outcome. It's because the legal issue is kind of dictating where you go on a particular policy issue. So in response to this, I would please discuss it at whatever length you see fit. But I encourage you, please let me know, give me feedback in the future if you see this as a problem. But otherwise, I'm not sure it's necessary or appropriate for a strategic plan. I don't even know how this kind of ties into our strategic plan. So,
Okay. All right. Thank you. And that is the last request, was the last request we had for public comment. So if it's all right with the board
Sure.
president, I'm okay.
Close the window.
Close. Yep. Thank you very much. So our last goal area is outreach. And I will let my facilitator, Elizabeth, take over.
Thank you, Tricia. So we are on outreach. Do you have any refinements for the statement? An Oxford comma, perhaps?
The board informs, educates, forms, educates. I don't know, informs.
Would you like to add educates for informs and educates, or just?
I just informs. I like the board educates consumers, would provide education. I mean, I don't know. Members like inform. Because what we are doing is we're providing education. We'll do the outreach about.
I apologize. Is it only education, or at times does the board just informs, provides updates, or other actions of the sort? Or is it always strictly like education?
No, we do both.
Okay. Would you like to keep both informs or educates and informs, or if you have a preference over which one comes first?
I think it makes sense to do both. I think right now, if there's anything we do, it's informed, because from the feedback, there wasn't much description of education.
Okay. Any other refinements that you would like to see?
I'm okay with this. Sorry, somebody else have a comment.
Okay. We'll move on to outreach. Any issues you would like to address in the strategic plan? Anything that you saw in the environmental scan? And just a friendly reminder, we will have a hard stop at 5 and it's 4:42. No pressure.
Well, the number one weakness was that people were unaware of any outreach by the board. People would like to see more, and they're basically all the same. I would like to see creation of an outreach plan to change the narrative and get ahead of situations. board increase its presence and develop more consumer-facing perspective. So, seems to me, I mean, I don't know if I'm missing some. Is there outreach going on that I'm just not aware of? Lori, are you the best person to answer that?
I'm not aware.
I probably am. Thank you. We did put it into our sunset report about the various committees and the various people that we meet with. We receive presentation requests on a regular basis through the webmaster on our website, depending on who or what area they request. Sometimes they need licensing, sometimes they want enforcement, sometimes they want scope of practice, sometimes they specifically request me. As soon as we receive those requests, and we reach out to the person to find out the details of that, and then we process it to the appropriate unit. And then whoever is in that unit gives that presentation. An example is the California Nursing Student Association reached out and asked for licensing and enforcement, and both Christina Sprigg and Shannon Johnson stayed and presented, I believe at 6 or 7 o'clock at night on a Friday to CNSA. This is a routine process. So when people make the request, we do presentations. And then additionally, I serve with the California Correction Agency. I serve with various advisory committees as well. And I attend all of those. I'm part of California Hospital Association as well, and I attend their meetings. And I provide updates at each and every single one, and education at each and every single one if they have a question that need further clarification. The last one, the California Hospital Association, they were asking about our enforcement division, and I explained the process there. So we have several of those, and they were included in our sunset report. It lists off the various agencies and how we're involved with them, the various stakeholders. And so I could, that's a great reference for the public to look at if they're wanting specifics to that. I apologize.
So
Sorry.
As I mentioned earlier, I think we need to involve the board members with some of these outreach activities, such as visiting, some of the schools.
So right now, we are not even visiting the schools. So just so that you know, our continuing approval visits since the pandemic started went virtual for health reasons. And of course, as you know, just yesterday, the state opened back up, and we are waiting for all of our NECs to become fully vaccinated. And once everybody is fully vaccinated on their choice and able to travel, then we will go back out and start doing in-person visits. Our investigators that are in the field, they based on safety and vaccination status, et cetera, are going out there, and then depending on whether or not the health care facilities are allowing them in to do the investigations too is occurring. But over this past year, the outreach and the travel has been greatly decreased because of the pandemic. And so there has not been any in-person outreach that has been occurring. It has all been through a virtual component.
Which I think is fine. I mean, that's still, but I think even by the definition of outreach, it's when, not waiting for someone to ask us and we respond, but, planning and having, having processes in place where we actually, make, an effort to reach certain groups. So I think probably based on this, probably for us, it would be to create and implement a comprehensive outreach plan.
Laura, do we have a newsletter?
We had a newsletter that was being performed weekly during the pandemic, and then with the sunset report that had to be written and the hearings, and then the response paper and the hearings, that was less of a priority at that point, so that newsletter stopped. We did hand over the newsletter to the information officer to see if that was a process that he could pick up and carry. And he did put out one newsletter, and we're now evaluating the frequency of that and whether that's appropriate to stay with him or if it should come back to me to be a newsletter. So that newsletter is an internal newsletter. It's shared with BRN staff and board when it is published. We do have a BRN report that does go out on a regular basis. The company that did manage that no longer manages that, and it's now going out. So we do have a edition that will go out to the public as a BRN report, probably within this quarter. But that is finalizing, and then that will be handled through the information officer as well, as he grows in his role and will manage and oversee that process. So there is that that is occurring there. So hopefully that helps as well. But we do have both of those.
And this is the co-facilitator. So just hearing the list of outreach, would you still want to increase outreach or remove that and just stay with creating a comprehensive plan?
Yeah, I think we should take the increase out. And I would say instead it would do create, implement, and evaluate plan, because we have a lot of work to do in this area.
Okay, and just throwing it out there, if you're creating a plan, I would imagine that in action planning, that's where it will be broken down, this objective. But I would imagine there's an assessment, evaluation, you assess all the different methods that you're conducting outreach, all your stakeholder groups, target market, and all of that. But we can definitely have create, implement, evaluate here, a comprehensive outreach plan. And what would be the benefit?
I would say something like to build relationships and support licensees and consumers.
Okay. Board members, any feedback, any refinements? Feel free to unmute your microphones or send me a message, or Tricia, a message through chat.
How would we evaluate the response to this? I'm just curious.
Well, I think it just goes to the what was just suggested, like in order to create this plan, we'd want to go out and do an assessment of, what are the best practices in terms of boards of nursing and outreach plans. And then we would put our plan, and once we figured that out, then we would say, okay, what of these can and will we do, put that in place. And then for each thing we were going to do, we'd say, well, how would we evaluate if it's effective? So we would need to build that all into the plan, I think.
Definitely.
I mean, that's also, I think, a point I made earlier, and I think Ken also made, that we want to make sure we do about the strategic plan too, right? That we really implement it and then we evaluate our progress towards these things. So, we can hold ourselves accountable to make sure we're moving forward with these important initiatives.
Okay. Any further discussion on this objective? On the create and implement comprehensive outreach plan? So for the second objective here, involve board members. Do you want to elaborate a little bit more on that?
So real quick on the involved board members, we need to make sure that no more than two or do any of these outreaches, because after that, it would have to be a public meeting.
Would you like us to put in parentheses no more than two?
Yes, in any setting, no more than two board members can meet and carry out board business, which this would be as not to violate Begley.
Okay, would you like all of that?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay, I was just gonna, and maybe, this is between me and Lori. Lori, would you be open to like involve board members, parentheses, consistent with applicable law or something? I feel weird about being very specific about the law governing
Yeah,
meetings
I'm
and, you know,
open
formal
to-
communications here.
I'm open to however you want to wordsmith that. You're always the guru
Maybe-
on that for me, Reza. Thank you.
Thank you. I wonder if we could maybe strike the parenthetical and then finish the sentence and then kind of think about how to fold in something about, you know, bag the key issue.
Thank you. This is the co-facilitator. I believe consistent with applicable law would be a more concise way of explaining no more than.
Actually, can you actually strike even that consistent with applicable law?
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to just return to that thought after we've kind of fleshed out what the actual item will be.
And what would be the benefit of involving, or do you want to be more specific as to involve board members in outreach? Thank you, Tricia. What would be the benefit?
This is Jovita. I would like an example from what happened this morning, maybe having more of a presence, you know, so that way it can facilitate the school that is going the right way or is not going the right way with their education plan. And that way they can see that there is a presence and that we do care that they succeed. Not so much, you know, I think COVID taught us a lot that, yeah, we can still conduct business on WebEx and Zoom, but it is very different to be in person versus a barrier of a computer.
Board members, any feedback or refinements to the objective? And just
That's a good point.
I want to say build relationships, but I don't know if that's appropriate here. I mean,
It is a good thought, Imelda, but unfortunately, you know, they have to see that it's like a governing board, you know, and it is a relationship, but in a different way. I mean, that's how I
Right.
see it.
This is the
I wonder if we would want to fine tune what this is more when we have, once we develop the plan and see what the components are. And then it might make sense what things board members would get more involved in. That there should be a who in this plan about when we're creating things and, you know, articulate when the board members should, could and should be involved.
So are you recommending to not be specific as to support schools and licensees, just leaving it more broad?
I'm even wondering altogether, and it can totally stay if we even need this bullet item right now, but we build it into the other one, the plans.
Okay. So it can be
Yeah, we can
an
do that.
action item? Go ahead.
I'm okay with that, incorporating it with the other action item to create, implement, and evaluate. We can somehow incorporate it there.
And we can say that as a note for action item, for action planning, so it can go under as an action item. Is that okay with everyone?
That's fine.
Yes.
I just want to do a time check. It's 4:57, and I know there are board members and maybe staff that have a hard stop at 5 o'clock.
How much more time?
3 minutes.
Yes, that is correct. I believe we have 3 board members that have a hard stop at 5 o'clock, so we will no longer have a quorum. Additionally, we do have overtime after 5 o'clock that I need to take into consideration. So we may look at adjourning and rescheduling the remaining of this.
How much more time do we have?
3 minutes.
How much more time to review the?
I think this was the last one, wasn't it?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I mean, I'm willing to finish this out if that's okay with everyone else.
What else do we?
We still have 2 members that do not, that have a hard stop. So
I'm okay,
we won't-
I'm okay staying, so that
Can
I was one of those.
can I ask?
Hold if this is the last thing, Dolores.
Okay, I know Susan has a hard stop, so if everyone else is willing to stay on, we still have a quorum.
And sorry to interrupt. This is the co-facilitator, I think. Facilitator.
Yes, so this is our last goal area. The next slide is to add up the total of objectives and just ask how long you believe it will take the board to achieve the strategic plan. So generally you're picking from between 2 to 4 years, and then that's it. So I don't know if you have any more objectives for outreach or if you're okay with this one. But the next slide is just totaling up the number of objectives.
Does that totaling of the number of objectives need to be done during a board meeting right here? Is that pivotal to this, or could we agenda item this later? I just have to make sure that I have a justification for this and I could send it forward to DCA since they're now on overtime.
Don't you think we could do that when we look at the next time we look at the next draft, right?
I think the reason they want to total the number of items is so that they can say, here's how many you have, how long do you think you'll need to do this? I think kind of an important question right now is, do we have any other items for outreach?
I don't have it.
If we don't, then we can
I-
pretty quickly wrap it up.
Again, we're going to also look this over again, maybe in August. Can we add if we see fit in August?
Are we going to be in a board meeting in August? Lori or?
We do have a scheduled board meeting in August. We have committee meeting in a week, and then we have another committee meetings that were scheduled for July. So if we need to schedule an additional board meeting to open up a committee meeting, we can absolutely do that since people would be present. But we can be creative with getting this in if we have a time crunch, but I just know we have to have a hard stop right now.
We could do this as part of the August board meeting.
Yeah, I'm in favor of that. Any other, is that possible?
August meeting's good with me.
Okay,
And I'm flexible, whatever the majority wants.
Ken? Or did Ken leave? Ken?
It's muted. I won't be here in August, so I'm okay with it.
I didn't know if you felt strongly that you wanted to finish it up now.
No, I'm sorry. However you guys want to do it, I think we got a lot accomplished, and if people need to leave, that's fine.
All right. Okay, I think we can probably leave this part till August.
Okay. All right, so you did create a total of 20 objectives. Good work. And when I can provide you with a draft, and then at your August meeting, you can decide how many years you want to take to achieve this new strategic plan. And if you need to add to it, you can do it at that time as well.
And when we look at it in August, can we also articulate how we're going to evaluate its success too? If we can make sure we take time to do that, that would be really helpful for me.
Yes, so the next step is action planning, and then we provide a tracker for the board to track progress, and we also offer a report card follow-up. That could be done in a year, 2 years, 3 years, depending on how long the strategic plan is, to provide you with a report card for how you're doing so far.
Great, great. That would be so helpful.
Our last strategic plan was dated 2018 through 2021, just for reference, so you guys can see what the previous strategic plan year span was.
But are there any report cards about that previous strategic plan? I haven't seen any.
I have not seen any either.
So let's make sure we do that, really follow through on that piece.
All right, and I believe I need to give Mark control of this meeting back. So let me stop sharing so I can make him the host again.
Are we opening for public comment?
No, that here.
My understanding is the last agenda item is just to adjourn, but we will verify that.
Okay.
We did public comment for the other areas. I'm not sure if we did it for this one. I know
We
we're
haven't.
obviously past our
Yeah.
time, but if at all it can be squeezed in here, I think it'd be better, but
Okay, so I just made the moderator, the host, the BRN moderator, the host. I don't know if he's still on.
Yeah,
or
I'm here.
not. Okay, okay. So if you want to
So-
do public comment.
Oh, did we want to do public comment? I'm sorry.
Sure.
yeah, just a quick,
Yeah.
folks, I think know by now how to do this. So if any members of the public have any comments on this last piece, please, and Mark, would you open the box? Please type in that you'd like to make a comment.
All right, it's open.
Thank you.
I don't see any requests.
There are no requests for comment. Would you like
Sure.
me to close that window?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then item 6.0, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Solid.
Night,
You're
thank
welcome.
you.
Public.
Good night.
Good night.